So people have been talking a lot about the protests at colleges all across the country.
The battles on college campuses are police in riot gear.
Universities crack down on pro-Palestinian protests.
Pro-Palestinian protesters.
And I decided to go see what was happening for myself and visit the University of Penn and their encampment, where a lot of protesters had been posted up for the last few weeks. But just 12 hours after we left campus, the mellow scenes that we witnessed on campus turned into this.
Police in full tactical gear, sweeping the campus, breaking up pro-Palestinian demonstrations.
When we were there, the protests were pretty benign. There have been some ebbs and flows throughout the weeks of these protests. Sometimes things escalate, sometimes things de-escalate. And it feels worth saying that just for the few hours that we were on campus, it was basically pretty mellow. A bunch of people sitting around listening to other folks talk or give speeches or playing music through a megaphone or dancing. There was really not much combativeness or fighting or anything really intimidating at all happening on campus. I stopped to talk to many students and asked for their opinions about the protests, and most just said,
"Would you be willing to talk at all about it? I have like a YouTube channel we're doing a story about. I don't know if like you'd be..."
I have a midterm in like I have a final in like 6 minutes, so probably not now.
You guys Penn students? Would you talk about all this stuff or no?
You're a journalist.
Yeah, we're interviewing people. I'm trying to talk to like some normie Penn students about what it's like with all this craziness going on. Yeah, all good, man. No worries. As media, are we allowed to go in if we leave our stuff behind?
I can ask the students. It's up to them.
I'm getting a bunch of no's in the chat, so.
Getting a bunch of no's?
Yeah.
I have a question for you. Would you guys be interested in talking about your interaction with the counter protesters at all? Or
I'm
you
just a marshal, so I'm not trying to be on film.
So the vibe that I got was pretty mellow for most of the time that we were there.
I would get all this.
They made it pretty clear that they don't want us here.
All right, guys, so I am here on Penn's campus. Been talking to a lot of students, been going up to some folks and asking them to chat with us. To be honest, our shooting percentage is quite low. Here at the student encampments, one of the things that seems to be policy is that they don't actually let participants in the encampment speak to the media. They have a couple of specific media liaisons. We had a few interactions with some marshals who are sort of protecting the encampment that you'll see or hear on the video. And we got to speak to one student liaison. Very interested in just like trying to talk to some organizers. I don't know if you could point me in the direction of those people or if we're allowed to go in the encampment or what the rules are.
Sure. We don't let press in the encampment until we have a media liaison from the students. So I will go see what I can do.
Okay, so first of all, something interesting you just said to me right before we got on camera is that you're not actually a Penn student, you're a Temple student.
Yeah.
I'd love to hear you talk a little bit about like what's happening here from a Philadelphia perspective, because it seems like you feel like we're at the Penn encampment obviously, but this is more than that to you.
So essentially, the University of Pennsylvania doesn't pay property tax in Philadelphia, and you know, a lot of money that should be going to Philadelphia's crumbling infrastructure, crumbling school system, you know, crumbling like public services aren't, because the University of Pennsylvania doesn't pay property taxes. It's actually a very tax-exempt institution. And coupled with that, the University of Pennsylvania has been instrumental in expanding gentrification and displacement in West Philadelphia, you know? So we understand this not just as a Penn issue, it's a Philadelphia-wide issue. As long as the university takes money from the city of Philadelphia, as long as the university does not give back to the city of Philadelphia and continues occupying West Philly, you know, this cannot necessarily be seen as a Penn-only issue. We even have a sign over here from West Philly to the West Bank, you know, occupation is a crime. The institutions like Penn that oppress people here and displace people, are the same institutions and are connected to the same institutions that are committing a genocide right now in Palestine and are aiding the military occupation. Divestment is one of our goals. So yeah, like it's about both understanding how these structural issues are interconnected and building shared solidarity between people in Philadelphia and people in Palestine.
So I'm curious to hear more about the divestment stuff, because that, to me, as I understand it, is like one of the core goals for you guys. So where exactly is the university putting their money, and what do you want them to do differently than what they're doing?
Yeah, so Penn has a $35 billion endowment, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. And the university does not disclose, like other universities are better, specifically like Rutgers and stuff, are better at disclosing where their investments are, like, you know, making their portfolio public. Penn is not. Penn's portfolio, so we don't know where Penn's tuition dollars are going. We know, like, that they have investments in Ghost Robotics, for example, which builds robotic machinery that's literally used to kill people across the world. You know, it's like a weapons manufacturing company. And we know Penn has connections to companies like Lockheed Martin, to Vanguard, to the entire military-industrial complex. These specific investments we are unsure of, which is why our first demand is to disclose those investments. You know, Northwestern has a system where, or they won a system recently where they could disclose their investments, and then once they disclose their investments, push a student referendum out to get them to divest. Divestment isn't unique to this movement. It's been employed most notably in South Africa, in the anti-apartheid movement. So we're living in the tradition of organizers from decades prior to us who got their universities and their institutions to divest. We're hoping we can do the same thing here.
Okay, so the university has been, responding publicly, I guess, in a lot of ways to these protests.
Yeah.
I'm curious what your read is on how they're taking your demands. Are they considering them? Have you guys made progress in kind of pressuring them into any kind of disclosure, divestment? Where does that stand right now?
Yeah, we've been in negotiations with them, and at various points, they've come up to us and what they claim is good faith negotiations. And they've told the media that they have tried to negotiate with us. To be honest, wait, real quick, how direct can I be with this?
You can be as direct as you like.
Yeah, to be honest, the administration has essentially told us to go fuck ourselves.
Yeah.
Throughout the series of negotiations. They've also put out multiple statements condemning our encampment as a place that makes people feel unsafe, as a place that, we've had newspapers call us terrorist sympathizers. The administration has enabled this sort of rhetoric with their own statements, characterizing the encampment as a place of disruption, a place of intimidation. Really, the only people that are really making this place feel unsafe are the Zionist agitators who come in and scream at us at 2 a.m, call us slurs, tell us we're all gonna die, say UCLA 2.0 is gonna happen here. So it's really frustrating and scary having that response from the administration, but as you can see, people are chilling. We have study hours, we had a teaching just now. It's really not an intimidating space. It's a very welcoming space. These barricades aren't ours. The police put them up. So everyone's welcome as long as you're not filming inside and agitating.
I'm curious about, we can't see it on camera, we'll get it after this, but there's a few, clear Jewish pro-Israel protesters who are just kind of standing over here on the other side. Jewish students on campus, obviously. Yeah. What's your experience been like with those people who have shown up or maybe have different views than you guys do? So, how's that gone?
So real quick, I just take issue with the characterization of people as Jewish that are showing up in opposition towards us, because the Jewish American community has been one of our most consistent support bases throughout this entire, duration of this entire encampment. We had a JVP seater that was huge, and it got families from all over Philadelphia, Jewish families, to come out in support of us. A Zionist agitator came in with a knife, tried to shut them down. So
I've heard some rumors about that.
Yeah, it was a big thing. We posted about it. Yeah.
I'm curious, do you think some of the fundamentals that you're laying out there, that they can coexist with the state of Israel in your mind? I mean, it seems like not based on what you're saying, but I don't know if that's your view.
I think that the people, see, that I obviously, like, in any decolonial movement, there will be that tension between those who were like the descendants of settlers and colonizers, who are settlers and colonizers, and people who are actively involved in decolonization. I don't think there is any argument that that Jewish people cannot exist in the state of Palestine. You know, I think that is not something anyone believes. A free Palestine would be multi-ethnic, would be multilingual, and would be multi-religious, right? However, the people who are currently profiting off of the occupation, the brutal military occupation, which, you know, a lot of them live in Israel. Israel has one of the highest rates of dual citizenship in the entire world. Most of the settlers in the West Bank are from Brooklyn, or like a lot of them are wealthier American Jews, or middle-class American Jews who, use the economic opportunity to settle illegally and take it, and they get a free home, the West Bank. Those people who profit off the genocide will necessarily leave once those power structures are dismantled, right? So yeah, I think that the people who currently inhabit the occupied Palestine and Palestinians can coexist peacefully? Of course I do. But the state of Israel and the state machinery of Israel, I think it's impossible.
Thanks, I appreciate you giving us some time.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. So when we were interviewing the student liaison, we actually heard this little bit of back and forth commotion right behind us.
This has nothing to do with that.
Do you guys chat with us instead of them?
Yes.
And it started when a Jewish student or counter-protester, I'm not sure which, but visibly Jewish, wearing a Star of David necklace and a yarmulke, began doing the Shema prayer. And then one of the people who was sort of standing with the pro-Israel counter-protesters yelled something across to some of the marshals that were sitting amidst all these signs, asking them if they knew what intifada meant and if they were supportive of violence, and there was this big back and forth. And so right when our interview got done, we went over and began speaking to those counter-protesters to hear a little bit about what happened. So it's worth noting that after we did this interview, we actually went over to the marshals and we said, hey, what's going on here? And they said, did you hear what that woman said? And I don't know, I saw the interaction and thought it was
terrible humans, yeah.
Why do you say that?
I mean, she was so transphobic. You didn't hear what she said?
No, I didn't hear what she said.
Interviewing.
She said really, I don't even want to repeat some stuff that she said.
Interesting.
She
She
told a trans woman to tuck it back in.
Tuck it back in.
That's what she yelled over
She said,
here?
it's showing, honey, you better tuck that back in.
UN supply shipments. I'm curious, do you think some of the fundamentals that you're laying out there coexist with the state of Israel? Now, I don't want to suggest this moment was representative of all the counter-protesters or anything else we really saw. In fact, it was a pretty unique moment, but it was an ugly one. So we were just talking to one of the student liaisons over there. I saw you kind of getting into what's going on. I just saw you arguing with somebody.
Yeah, it erupted into something it didn't need to erupt, but we were basically saying they were standing in front of signs that says Intifada. Intifada means uprising. I lived through the second Intifada, actually through the first one. I was a baby then, but I definitely lived through the second Intifada, and I was just telling them that calling for a ceasefire and also for violence at the same time is a contradictory statement. You can't do that.
Yeah, and so are you Israeli?
Yes.
Interesting. So are you a Penn student?
I'm not a Penn student. I'm here to support the Jewish students. I heard from my friend here who is a Penn alum that they've been standing here kind of doing a counter-protest, and a lot of Jewish students are feeling seen and heard and protected, just feeling a little bit a sense of less isolation and belonging. So
yeah. So what's your experience been like since you've been out here? I mean, is this your first day?
It's my first day. I've been here for a couple of hours. I heard last night was a bit more
we heard that too.
Rowdy, and that there was a lot going on. I heard that a lot of them come at around 8 o'clock or so. It's organized. Around 300 people came last night from what I understood. And so a lot of them are not Penn students. They're outside agitators that are coming to create mayhem and and to create chaos.
Yeah. So I guess by being out here, what do you hope? What's your goal?
By being out here, my only goal was to, when a Jewish student passes by, to know that they're not alone. This is very intimidating. This is very overwhelming. There's a lot of statements there that are making Jews feel unsafe, making Jews feel isolated. They're delegitimizing our ancestral homeland, which is Israel, the state of Israel. In fact, what they don't understand is that, as a side note, that they are actually legitimizing more the existence of Israel by telling us that, by intimidating Jews in the diaspora, which is what they're doing. So I'm here to support the Jewish students.
I'm curious, I was just interviewing one of the student liaisons, and one of the things he said, I said, hey, look, looks like there's like some Jewish counter protests over there. And he said, this is a totally open encampment. We have many American Jews who are here, who are participating in these protests. Like the counter protesters that we're worried about has nothing to do with them being Jewish or whatever. It's kind of the Zionist movement that we're worried about. I'm curious, like, how you would respond to that. I'm certain that there are Jewish students in there, and from his perspective, he's like, this is not about a Jewish divide versus us. This is about the Zionist divide versus us.
Right. So that's a really great way. So there's a lot of Jews that are tokenizing themselves. They're radicalized, they're brainwashed, they're uneducated about their own history, and they're overly assimilated in the diaspora to the point that they don't understand how history repeats itself. Anti-Zionism is a modern day word for anti-Semitism. It was actually passed in Congress, the definition that anti-Zionism equals anti-Semitism for that reason. Delegitimizing the existence of the state of Israel is anti-Semitism. Calling for the erasure of Jews from the land of Israel is anti-Semitism. And so Jews that are standing with that are tokenizing themselves to the cause, just like you can have any race or any ethnicity, any group of people holding self-hatred in their values, whether it be through radicalization, brainwashing, or whatever conflict. Those Jews do not represent the majority of us. 95% of Jews are Zionists. Zionism is intrinsically attached to what it means to be a Jew.
One of the things that feels really tough about this for me in trying to understand these protesters is a lot of them seem like they are seeing the images of the war online, on Instagram, on TikTok, on Twitter, and they're horrified, They're horrified by what's happening. And I'm sympathetic to that. I understand being anti-war. I understand how, anybody, not just a college student, but anybody could see what's going on in Gaza right now and feel a great deal of sympathy for Palestinians or Gazans. And yeah, I'd be curious if you sort of speak to that a little bit, or how you weigh that with your understanding that, like, maybe these people don't believe that you have the right to exist as an Israeli, or that the state of Israel doesn't have a right to exist.
I think you're bringing up a great point. So it's important to have empathy, right? And when you're seeing when you're seeing footage of people suffering, people shouldn't suffer no matter which side on the map they're on, which ethnicity, which religion, etc. So suffering is never okay. We are in a war that Israel is in a war that it didn't start. And war, unfortunately, has casualties. Are we saying that it's okay? No, we're not saying it's okay. What we're saying is Hamas embedded themselves within civilians' structures, within schools, within hospitals, within civilian buildings. Israel has a really difficult task. They opened this war against us. This is not something that we incited. This is something that actually resulted in October 7th. There's been 17 years of missiles being fired at Israel unprovoked, and we barely retaliated when those things were happening. And so we've allowed this. People don't hear about it in the news. And so war is bad. Nobody's saying that they don't feel for Palestinians. Both Israelis and Palestinians, well, I don't know about Palestinians, I can speak for Israelis, but Israelis want peace for Palestinians. We want them to thrive. We want them to have their own nation. We want them to have self-determination. But we don't want that self-determination be in our expense, in the expense of our lives. We would like coexistence. And that is the message that most Israelis, the vast majority of us, are sending out there. To create a situation where you only have empathy for one side and not for the other is a problem. And this is what we're seeing over here.
I guess I'm wondering, looking ahead now, given where things are, what seems to you like a reasonable solution to what's next? I know certainly some Zionist Jews who support a ceasefire. I know a lot of Zionist Jews who believe that Israel has to, continue with this invasion in Rafah and finish the job and root out Hamas. You're standing here across from this protest that isn't just calling for a ceasefire, but is also calling for the school to divest. And, My understanding of a lot of their position is moving past a quote-unquote Israeli state into one like unified Palestinian state. You know, these are things that that came up in the interview that I just did. I guess I'm wondering where you stand on some of this like larger look-ahead issue. And
sure, about what things should look like moving forward, you mean?
Yeah.
Well, and this is my personal beliefs. I can't speak for the entire people of Israel, but my personal position is that, first of all, we have a problem that we do need to root out Hamas. Hamas is a terrorist organization that are running the people of Gaza, and also they're prominent in the West Bank. So people who don't say they're in the West Bank, they're wrong. They're holding key positions there. And we are dealing with a society right now, the Palestinian society is radicalized. We need to de-radicalize that society. It's a society that glorifies death for the sake of achieving their cause. You cannot live as peaceful neighbors side by side with that kind of society that just wants to kill you, and that glorifies death in this way. So once de-radicalization happens, then we can root out Hamas, hopefully with some international interference. I don't know. I don't have all the answers. I'm not a politician. I don't know how to do it. But I would love to see a situation kind of like what happened after Nazi Germany. You know, the German people have gone through a process of de-radicalization. I would love to see the Palestinian people living in a society where they understand that Israelis are not going anywhere, the Jews are not going anywhere, and that we both can coexist. But it has to happen first. They need to believe that we have the right to live there and to not want to kill us. Like, that's all we want, is to live.
Awesome. Thank you so much for the time. I appreciate you speaking with us. The student liaison who we spoke to earlier, you might notice, is now up on the statue drawing on it. He's covered his face up a bit since we chatted. It was sort of a little bit of a hoopla thing. It seems like there's some movement, some activity in the encampment. Things definitely changing a little bit, the energy definitely changing a little bit. We were just talking to him a few minutes ago and also noticed that the campus police are now starting to line the fences a little bit. They're watching what's happening. They're keeping an eye on it. I saw them taking pictures on the phone. The police officers were taking pictures on their phone, and it seems like they're sort of deciding whether this is the kind of thing we want to respond to. Is this vandalism? Is this whatever? So these are the sorts of ebbs and flows that I think these protests have, and the way they kind of escalate and come back down, and escalate and come back down. But again, on the whole, I'm standing right here, the encampment's right there. You see the whole campus just moving and operating behind me. I think it's mostly been unobtrusive. We did have a couple students tell us they weren't interested in being interviewed, but they said, you know, they've had to close the library down like 10 times in the last few days, and it's finals week, and that's just really annoying. And it's not necessarily a big deal, but it's also not ideal when you're a student here trying to study. This is life here. It's just pretty much normal, with just this one thing happening behind us pretty constantly.
About 12 hours after we were on Penn's campus, the Philadelphia Police Department arrived and began clearing protesters out from the encampment. They gave them about a 2-minute warning to pack up all their things and then leave the campus area where they had been camping for the last few days.
If you do not leave within 2 minutes, you will be arrested for defiant trespassing on private property. If you leave now, you will not be arrested.
33 people, including 9 Penn students, were arrested, and shortly after they left the encampment, the police basically rounded up all of their tents and belongings and threw them into a dump truck. Some faculty and protesters then tried to block the police from leaving, and in the hours after the encampment was broken down, protesters took to the street, once again demonstrating, this time against the university's response, even showing up at the University of Penn's president's home. Well, some campus protests and encampments are coming to a close, mostly through forcible means. Others are springing up across the country and around the world, and the fallout for both universities and students is ongoing. Very curious to hear your guys' thoughts and responses, so as always, let us know if you have any questions or feedback in the comments section of the video.